The current glory of Zwillingstürme is built upon him. The fact that Leithanian still stands today is also because of him. In that heart, if you wish to talk about Leithanian after its spires and arts, you will eventually start to discuss him. He who the masses once called Herkunftshorn, though now more infamously known as the Witch King. Today, we will discuss the rise and fall of the Witch King, from how he was first considered as Leithanian's savior, its greatest ruler yet, to how he became feared as the worst tyrant in Leithanian history. But of course, before everything, we will have to talk about Leithanian itself, specifically its history before the Witch King was born. Section 1. Die Leithanische Geschichte. Over 1,000 years ago, before the current Terran era calendar was even invented, there were 10 tribes who each occupied a vast majority of land at the heart of Terra. The land bordered the Pegasus Kingdom to the northwest, the Hippogrific Empire to the north, and ancient Castel to the east. The valleys and plains scattered among the mountains were the places occupied by these early tribal civilizations. The earliest towns originated here, and the first nomadic cities also emerged in this area as well. Among the 10 tribes who lived in these mountainous regions, there was a tribe of 𝐑𝐢𝐬𝐿 who were blessed with powerful originium arts. They integrated what they considered the most powerful medium, sound, into their arts, using it as a carrier for their spells, and they constantly continued to improve their craft. In such an atmosphere of study, arts and culture activities related to music were born, which impressed the other tribes and caused the members of other regions to converge, save for the Syracusan region. However, the 10 tribes, including the tribe of the Syracusan region, eventually decided to bond together in order to defend themselves against the threat of Castel in the east. Witnessed by an all-powerful immortal caster, sages from the various tribes came together and formed a pact called the 𝐷𝐢𝐻𝐺, marking the founding of the Empire of Leithanian, with the head of the ARKNIGHT tribe as its first Kaiser. True to its name, the 𝐷𝐢𝐻𝐺 was a musical arrangement, a symphony made up of 3 different movements. Jedoch, the 𝐷𝐢𝐻𝐺 was also beyond just a mere score, and it also laid out the foundation of all succeeding laws of Leithanian. According to the pact, Leithanian would be divided into 10 Kreise. Except for Kreis Syracusa, each Kreis would be ruled by a Kurfürst, and the Kurfürsten would also elect the Kaiser from among themselves. Still, for centuries to come, the Kurfürsten would suppress the Kaiser's authority and become thorns to the empire. Now, after the newly established Leithanian Empire accomplished its goal to resist the foreign invaders, the empire began to develop rapidly at the center of Terra. In the 5th century, when the liches of the Sarkas arrived in Leithanian to teach its inhabitants originium arts, the empire flourished even more rapidly. During this period of time, the Leithanian citizens, with their passion for both arts and music, eventually birthed a unique form of originium arts that broke traditional convention by combining it with their own orchestrations. Meanwhile, the Leithanian nobles possessing advanced originium arts and a deep understanding of Leithanian's culture began to establish academic and educational institutions in their territories, disseminating their knowledge and exploring new and unknown fields. These institutions commonly existed in the form of spires, and the first noble to establish such a spire was Ludwig von Urtica, a Kurfürst von Kreis Einwald. It is said that before Ludwig established his own spire as the first university, all knowledge was locked away by the powerful within the spires. His institute, which was called Ludwigs Universität, still remains as Leithanian's top university even until today. With Kurfürsten Ludwig's efforts, Leithanian's originium arts gradually became more advanced and widespread among the empire's citizens, während their talent in originium arts did not seem to have been enough to eliminate the lurking dangers both within and outside the empire. As the empire developed, Leithanian faced constant friction with its neighboring countries. often developing into military confrontations. For example, in the year 897 of the Terra calendar, Leithanians sent troops to the war-torn quagmire of Bolivar, where they established a puppet regime, the Singas dynasty, in an attempt to gain complete control over Bolivar. Castel's most recent disintegration was also the result of a grand crusade led by Gaul's nobles, several Victorian dukes, and Leithanian kurfürsten in the winter of 898. During this era, the long-standing separatist sentiments within the empire also came to the forefront. Kreis Syracusa, which had significant differences from the other 9 Kreise, erupted in a massive uprising in the year 967. This sentiment subsequently spread to the other 9 major Kreise, especially Kreis Lupucan, leading to widespread rebellion within Leithanian. Then there were the Kurfürsten. Using the suppression of the independence movement as a pretext, they demanded even more resources and political favoritism. In reality, they were using this opportunity to strengthen their own power. By this point, the long-standing Leithanian Empire was on the brink of collapse. Yet, in this time of great crisis, a legendary ruler ascended to the throne of Kaiser. His rule brought about a long period of variation in Leithanian's symphony, and he would go down in history as not only Leithanians, but also as Terra's greatest caster. The people called him Herkunftshorn. Section 2. Der Aufstieg des Hexenkönigs. Born Otto Dietmar Gustav von Urtica, the Caprinine nobleman who would come to be known as the Witch King, hailed from the house of Urtica, the same house that birthed Kurfürsten Ludwig, founder of Ludwig's Universität. His family specialized in originium arts, and so it was no wonder that Otto would grow up to be a talented musician. At a young age, he was able to review 634 great scores of classical Leithanian music, all composed by famous musicians and great casters. Indeed, they were all reputable names in Leithanian history. Yet, when he took the melodies apart, he found that these same scores flowed with dead melodies and crusty notes. None of them were to his liking, and all of them were stuck in the past. But how was this still the very same art that Leithanian was so proud of? With his prodigious arts, he deducted the situation for the next century, and the young Otto became dissatisfied with the current state of affairs in Leithanian. Iberia would form an alliance with the sea, Victoria's steel knights would soon spew steam, and the Gauls would bloom in the deep forests of 𝐖𝐢𝐽𝐷. But what of Leithanian, with their pretentious noblemen and rigid political system that has become the country's own poison? If this problem was not solved, how could Leithanian hope to survive the next century? He asked his current Elafian mentor, who claimed to be the most knowledgeable man in all of 𝐖𝐢𝐽𝐷, but the mentor was unable to answer the frustrated Otto, so he fired him, and the Elafian's house soon fell into decline afterward. Now realizing that he had grown tired of the hypocrisy that had run deeply within the country, and no one but himself would be able to change it, Otto swore to take matters into his own hands. For the next 10 years, Otto spent his days studying at Ludwig's Universität. At the university, he would come to be tutored by Professor Fremont, the Lich King of the Sarkas court. While the two strictly remained in a master-disciple relationship at the beginning, this would change as the Lich King would grow fond of his talented disciple and then later become Otto's dearest friend. When Otto had climbed the tallest spire of Ludwig's Universität, he finally graduated. Once he reached adulthood, he became the Kurfürst of Kreis 𝐖𝐢𝐽𝐷, the Kreis of the Urtica. But he would only later be crowned the Kaiser of Leithanian by the age of 50, upon being elected by the Kurfürsten. As Otto became the Kaiser, he brought an ideological reformation in the country, and the masses sung praises of him as Herkunftshorn, the Horn of Genesis. Then that became his new name. The new Kaiser Herkunftshorn initiated drastic political reforms by centralizing the monarch's power and diminishing the Kurfürsten's role in politics. He gave equal treatment between the aristocrats and the common folk, and abolished the servant system. As such, he was beloved by the citizens, and he too loved the citizens back equally. In the entirety of Leithanian's history, Herkunftshorn's treatment of the regular Leithanian civilians was unsurpassed, and he advocated that talent was more important than lineage. A statistical chart shows that before the Witch King ascended to the throne, only 7% of those who obtained degrees were regular civilians. This number shot up to 35% during the Witch King's reign, but in the first 10 years of the next reigning Kaiserinnen, it dropped to only 12%. In this regard of spreading education freely among the masses, you can say that he truly resembled his late ancestor, Kurfürst Ludwig. By far, however, the most remarkable achievement that Herkunftshorn had ever achieved was his dealing with the Syracusan separatist movement. At the beginning of his reign in the Terran year 969, when Leithanian was in chaos because of the separatism that had violated Leithanian's guardian art, the 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐠 that bound the 10 Kreise together, only Herkunftshorn rose up to correct the centuries-old arts pact, so intricate that Leithanian's greatest grandcasters had always thought it was impossible to rewrite it. Yet, Herkunftshorn was able to do so, removing the name of Syracusa from the scores and demonstrating his unsurpassed mastery over the arts. After the amendment, he formally recognized Syracusa's independence, hence ending the era of chaos that had pushed Leithanian to its brink. At that time, Leithanian citizens saw Herkunftshorn as their savior, a messiah of the ages, but no one could have predicted the terror that lay ahead. Section 3. Der Sturz des Hexenkönigs. As Herkunftshorn continued to centralize power in the imperial court, he became the first Kaiser in history that possessed power surpassing that of the Kurfürsten. With this unimaginable authority, he then began to reform the nation's laws extensively, while ensuring the overall cultural unity of Leithanian. The education and economy sectors rapidly expanded. Under his leadership, Leithanian flourished. However, these measures also caused dissatisfaction among other nobles. In response to the growing discontent among the nobles, Herkunftshorn dealt with dissenters ruthlessly. This only led to even more intense resistance. Conflicts and confrontations escalated, and his methods became increasingly brutal. The soldiers who had originally suppressed the rebellions were now used as spies and secret agents by the nobles. Angered, Herkunftshorn began to carry out widespread arrests and even direct killings of dissenters, plunging Leithanian into a prolonged period of bloodshed and horror. Many horrifying atrocities occurred during this time. During this period, Herkunftshorn's image was far removed from that of a wise ruler in the minds of the people. He isolated himself in his high spire, rarely appearing in public as the ruler of the nation. However, his increasingly mad and cryptic behavior made his loyalists worship him even more, and they still firmly believe in their god. Meanwhile, the Leithanians became even more and more afraid of their Kaiser. They either didn't want to or didn't dare to call him by his original name anymore. The title Witch King, which became more and more famous, gradually replaced Herkunftshorn. At the same period, however, the ambitious Emperor of Gaul then dispatched an envoy to Leithanian as an attempt to take it as a vassal state. The easily angered Witch King did not take this attempt kindly, and he had every Gaulish emissary in Leithanian's borders rounded up, deconstructed, and reformed as statues to send back to Gaul for display in his zorn towards that nation. Consequently, the curtain formally parted on the start of the War of the Four Nations, its first phase being the Gallo-Leithanian War. In the spring of 1029, Gaul's imperial army, the Grand Army, marched upon the soil of Leithanian and turned it into a hellish furnace of war. However, with his arts that bore the power of catastrophes, the Witch King alone blunted the Gallic hordes and shattered their vanguard. As the war ground to a halt, the other great powers made their move. Ursus and Victoria struck when Gaul was at its weakest, and they allied the Leithanians to annihilate the Gaulish Empire. Of course, Leithanian's Witch King stood at the very forefront during this battle. His fearsome arts earned him the infamous reputation of being the greatest caster that Terra had ever witnessed. The War of the Four Nations, which had shaken the entire continent of Terra, eventually came to an end on October 21, 1031. By the historians of today, it is considered as one of Terra's most significant and tragic events, which has led to the fall of the Gaulish Empire. The war had claimed millions of lives as the corpses and soldiers from various countries flooded the battlefield. Although Leithanian won the war, the country, which was the main battleground, suffered severe damage. However, instead of overseeing the recovery of the country, the Witch King intensified his tyranny. With no one capable of opposing his power and authority after the war, the Witch King was Leithanian's uncontested monarch. During that period, the Kurfürsten handed over infected to the Witch King in a regular quota for his arts experiments, and they could only treat this as a custody practice. Wahrhaftig, his terror was recorded in numerous stories, such as the death of a whole town as the result of just one of his arts experiments. Meanwhile, Leithanian suffered from a devastating economy and impoverished populace. Remaining shrouded in darkness, it seemed the country's future was bleak, and there was no chance for the empire to recover to its past glory. But not all hope was lost for Leithanian, as there was a Leithanian Herzog by the name of Leopold, who had played a huge role in halting Gaulish advancement with his arts, and also devised tactics that allowed the Leithanians to push the Gaulish back to their borders, eventually resulting in the Battle of Lingones that tore Gaul apart. While it was clear that the Witch King held him in high regard, like any Leithanian aristocrat who hated the Witch King in their roots for his tyranny, Leopold too yearned to challenge his rule. Somit, after the war, Leopold retrieved Gaulish arts technologies as trophies and led several rebellious Kurfürsten to secretly study them to find clues of the Witch King's weakness. Meanwhile, the Lich King Fremont, who served as a mentor to the Witch King when he was still young, now could only fear his own disciple. He who once was the Witch King's tutor and dearest friend could only lament in sorrow and guilt. But provided with this opportunity to correct his wrongs, he set aside those feelings and joined the project as well. He believed that if the Witch King was allowed to continue his reign, he could bring disaster to all of Terra. As such, Fremont and the Lich Court attempted to provide as much help as possible to Leopold's research team with the knowledge of Sarkaz arts. With a combination of both Gaulish arts technologies, Leithanian classical arts, and Sarkaz witchcrafts, they created a pair of homunculus caprinae who served as the antithesis to the Witch King's art. They were sisters to each other, and the golden-haired sister was named 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐺, while the black-haired sister was named Hildegard Grimmmacht. Unfortunately, Leopold would never get to witness his creations toppling the Witch King once and for all, as he passed away in the midst of the project. In the final 2 to 3 decades of the Witch King's rule, as he descended into Wahnsinn, he spent most of his time isolated in his high spire, almost completely cutting off all contact with the outside world. During this period, the power of the state returned to the hands of the Kurfürsten, and this made for the prime opportunity for the rebels to strike. The Septemberrevolution was a revolution that marked the end of the Witch King's tyranny after years of accumulating opposing voices. Hence, it was also called the September Aufstand. The rebels' army was led by the twin sisters Lieselot and Hildegard, who initially gained fame as the youngest co-principals in history. They also gained renown for their political stance, which was in opposition to the Witch King's faction, and in the September of 1077 their coup d'état began. The rebel army decisively defeated the Witch King's loyalists and advanced towards Vedunion, the current capital of the Witch King's reign. Despite facing formidable challenges from the destructive Originium arts of the Witch King's Spire, they pressed on. The battle reduced the Kurfürsten's soldiers to ashes, but the loyalists managed to hold the rebels at a stalemate. Undeterred, the twin sisters led an allied force in a daring nighttime siege on the capital, breaking through the 22 arts barriers protecting the Witch King's spire. They confronted him in a final showdown at dawn. With the defeat of the Witch King, the twin sisters emerged victorious, returning safely to the rebel forces with his corpse, an unprecedented defeat that the Kurfürsten had never witnessed. The triumph of the September Revolution marked the end of the Witch King's tyranny and ushered in a new era of Leithanian. As they gained growing popular support, the Kurfürsten decided to abandon tradition and crowned the twin sisters as the twin empresses of Leithanian. The era of the twin empresses marked an era of restoration. Stability was finally restored, and compensation was made to the survivors. On the other hand, some of the old policies were reverted back, such as the restoration of the rigid aristocracy rather than the meritocracy the Witch King established, and the Kurfürsten once again dominated the political field. And that brings us to the end of this video. If you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to read Zwillingstürme im Herbst for the continuation of Leithanian's story. And if you already have done that, ausgezeichnet und auf Wiedersehen. I know what you wanna hear from me. You wanna hear me say Scheiße